In the ancient world, few military commanders earned the awe, dread, and respect that surrounded the name Hannibal Barca. Born in 247 BCE in Carthage, a thriving power on the North African coast, Hannibal entered history during a moment when the Mediterranean was dominated by rising imperial ambitions. Carthage was a formidable trading empire with a strong navy, while Rome was rapidly evolving into a land-based superpower with disciplined legions and boundless ambition. From childhood, Hannibal was raised not merely to be a soldier, but to be Rome's sworn enemy. This personal oath would shape one of the most dramatic and daring military campaigns the world has ever seen. Hannibal's father, Hannibal Barca, was a seasoned general who had fought in the First Punic War. According to later historians, Hannibal once took his young son to a sacred altar and made him swear eternal hostility toward Rome. Whether the scene unfolded exactly as later chroniclers describe is uncertain, but its symbolic meaning remains powerful. Hannibal was born into a struggle he was destined to continue. Under his father's guidance, he learned the art of command, strategy, logistics, and psychological manipulation. For Hannibal, war was not merely a contest of strength, but a battle of minds and morale. Crossing the Alps, a march into legend. Hannibal's rise to command marked the beginning of the Second Punic War, and in 218 BCE, he undertook a feat that would become one of the most astonishing military maneuvers in recorded history. Instead of confronting Rome on familiar terrain, he led his army from Spain, through Gaul, and then across the Alps, a mountain barrier that most believed impossible for an army to pass. This was not a march of convenience or recklessness, it was a deliberate strike at the heart of Roman confidence. By appearing in northern Italy, Hannibal would force Rome to fight on its own soil. The journey was brutal and tested every ounce of discipline among his troops. Treacherous slopes, freezing temperatures, and rockfalls took a heavy toll. Men and animals slipped into ravines, froze on narrow passes, or starved along the way. The elephants, which would later terrify Roman soldiers, struggled most, yet their survival became a symbol of Hannibal's determination and the morale he instilled in his army. When Hannibal and his surviving troops finally descended into the Po Valley, they were battered, diminished in number, but very much alive. Their arrival sent shockwaves through Rome. No foreign army had invaded Italy in living memory. Hannibal had not only crossed a mountain range, he had crossed a psychological boundary Rome had assumed was unbreakable. Shock, strategy, and the breaking of Roman confidence. Once in Italy, Hannibal did not simply seek direct confrontations. His campaign revealed a deep understanding of psychology and human motivation. He aimed to undermine Rome's system of alliances, tempting Rome's subjects and neighboring tribes to defect. Cities that had once trusted Rome's protection began to hesitate. The thought that Rome was not invincible took root. Hannibal's first great victory came at the Battle of Trebia in 218 BCE. He tricked the Romans into fighting on ground soaked with freezing waters, weakening them before the real battle even began. Hidden Carthaginian forces emerged at the perfect moment, surrounding and overwhelming the enemy. The defeat shook the Roman military leadership and exposed their vulnerability to Hannibal's cunning. The next year, Hannibal struck again at Lake Trasimene, launching a devastating ambush during a morning fog. Roman forces stumbled blindly into a trap where Hannibal's troops attacked from concealed hillside positions. The Roman army was crushed in one of the greatest ambushes in military history, and panic gripped Rome. For the first time, the Roman Senate appointed a dictator, Fabius Maximus, whose strategy of delay and avoidance, known later as Fabian tactics, was designed to minimize direct conflict with Hannibal. This was a reluctant recognition of Hannibal's genius. Rome could no longer assume victory simply by marching into battle. The Battle of Cannae. Hannibal's most famous triumph came in 216 BCE at the Battle of Cannae, a confrontation that remains one of the most studied tactical engagements in world history. At Cannae, Hannibal faced a Roman army nearly twice the size of his own. Yet instead of retreating or fortifying, he crafted a formation that invited the Romans to press forward. He positioned his weaker troops in the center and allowed them to gradually give way. As the Roman legions pushed forward, believing they were gaining ground, Hannibal's stronger cavalry and infantry units curved around the sides and eventually encircled the Romans completely. The result was catastrophic for Rome. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed in a single day. More significantly, Rome's confidence, its belief in its own invincibility, was shattered. The scale of the defeat was so horrifying that many Roman allies across Italy began to reconsider their loyalty. Yet despite having dealt Rome the worst military defeat in its history, Hannibal did not march directly on the city. He understood that Rome's real power lay not in its walls but in its alliances and its political resilience. Instead, he continued a long campaign of pressure and attrition, aiming to weaken Rome slowly from within. Years of maneuver and stalemate. For more than a decade, Hannibal remained in Italy. He led his forces with precision, adapting constantly to new terrain and changing political circumstances. He maintained alliances with various Italian communities, managed supply lines under pressure, and continued to demonstrate tactical brilliance in skirmishes and positional warfare. However, Rome proved equally determined. Fabius Maximus's strategy of avoiding direct engagement gradually stretched Hannibal's resources. Rome shifted the war beyond Italy, attacking Carthaginian territories and weakening support there. Battle by battle, the strategic balance began to tilt. Hannibal had always relied on momentum, and slowly that momentum began to slip. By 203 BCE, the Carthaginian Senate recalled Hannibal to defend his homeland. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, where he faced Scipio Africanus, a Roman general who had studied his methods carefully. Hannibal fought with his characteristic ingenuity, but this time the advantage belonged to Rome. Carthage was defeated, and Hannibal's long campaign against Rome came to an end. Legacy of a military genius. Hannibal did not conquer Rome, but his legacy is not measured in territory gained. His name endures because he challenged one of history's greatest powers at the height of its strength, and forced that power to change. His crossing of the Alps remains one of the most daring logistical feats in warfare. His victory at Cannae is still taught in military academies around the world as the perfect example of battlefield encirclement. His use of morale, diplomacy, and psychological warfare set standards for strategic leadership. More than anything, Hannibal demonstrated that wars are not always won by the side with the largest army or the greatest resources. Wars are won by imagination, adaptability, discipline, and the ability to see possibilities where others see obstacles. Rome ultimately prevailed not because Hannibal lacked skill, but because Rome possessed extraordinary resilience and political unity. Yet Rome never forgot Hannibal. Roman parents frightened disobedient children with the warning, "Hannibal is at the gates." Hannibal Barca remains a towering figure in history, a commander who stepped into the heart of an empire and forced it to feel fear. His story continues to inspire admiration, not only for the victories he achieved, but for the scale of the challenge he dared to undertake. For a decade, the world watched in awe as Hannibal reshaped the meaning of courage, strategy, and ambition. His name endures not because he conquered Rome, but because he made Rome tremble. And that brings us to the end of Hannibal's incredible story, a tale of determination, strategy, and courage against impossible odds. If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient world and learned something new today, make sure to give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe. Got a historical figure you want us to cover next? Drop your suggestion in the comments below. I read every one of them. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring history.